I'll never forget that night. It was late, almost midnight, and the rain hadn't stopped for hours. The street outside my small apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every little sound echo. I was curled up on the couch, half asleep, when I heard it, a knock on my front door. At first, I thought I imagined it. Nobody ever visited me that late. But then it came again, harder this time. 3 quick knocks, then silence. My heart started racing. I got up, cautious, and approached the door. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Just the sound of rain hitting the concrete and the wind pushing against the building. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, every instinct telling me to lock up and pretend I wasn't home. But then I heard it, a voice, soft, shaky, almost a whisper. "Please, open the door. I need to talk to you." Something in that voice stopped me. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded desperate. So I unlocked the deadbolt and slowly pulled the door open. There, standing in the rain, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 16 or 17. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his clothes soaked through and clinging to his thin frame. His shoes, if you could even call them that, were falling apart, the soles peeling off. His eyes, though. I'll never forget those eyes. Big, brown, full of fear and something else, hope. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't know what to say, and he looked like he was searching for the right words. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, he said, You're my sister." I froze. My brain scrambled to process what he had just said. Sister? I didn't have a brother. I'd grown up an only child, raised by my dad after my mom died in a car accident when I was 6. There was no way this boy could be related to me. "You're wrong," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't have a brother." But he shook his head, his eyes shining in the dim porch light. "Your mom, her name was Diane Miller. She was my mom, too." The world tilted. Diane Miller. My mother's name. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. "What did you just say?" "My name's Tyler," he said, clutching the strap of a torn backpack slung over his shoulder. "I've been looking for you for months. They told me you died, that my sister died the night I was born. But you're alive. You're right here." I didn't know whether to slam the door or pull him inside. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of his words. My mother. A brother I never knew about. Lies I didn't even know existed. Before I could react, the wind picked up, blowing cold rain into the doorway. He shivered, his lips starting to turn blue, and that's what broke me. Whoever this boy was, he was out there in the storm with nowhere to go. "Come inside," I said quietly, stepping aside. He hesitated, like he didn't believe I meant it, then stepped in. The warmth of the apartment made the steam rise from his wet clothes, and the smell of rain and dirt filled the small space. He stood in the middle of my living room, dripping on the rug, looking both terrified and relieved. I handed him a towel and watched as he rubbed his face, his hands trembling. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in him, dark circles under his eyes, bruises on his arms, like life had been beating him down for years. "I know you don't believe me," he said, his voice breaking. "But I can prove it. I have a letter. From Mom." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded, water-stained envelope. My heart stopped when I saw the handwriting. I'd only seen it in old birthday cards and photo albums, but I'd recognize it anywhere. It was hers. I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears blurred my vision. I wanted to ask a million questions, where he'd been, who had raised him, why no one told me, but all I could do was sit there, holding that letter and shaking hands, while the boy who claimed to be my brother sat silently across from me, waiting for me to decide if I believed him. And deep down, something in me already knew the truth. I sat there frozen, clutching the damp letter in my hands, my mind trying to make sense of what was happening. The boy, Tyler, sat quietly across from me, his wet clothes leaving small puddles on my rug, his eyes glued to the floor. "Say it again," I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked up, hesitant, but repeated it clearly this time. "Her name was Diane Miller. She was my mom. And she's your mom too." Hearing her name out loud, after all these years, sent a chill down my spine. My mother's name. The name my father almost never said. It was like opening an old wound I thought had long healed, I stared at him, searching for any sign that this was some twisted scam, but there was something in his eyes, something raw, something familiar. "Who told you that?" I asked, my voice sharper now, almost accusing. Tyler swallowed hard. "A woman, at the last foster home I was in. She found an old box with a letter inside. It was from her, from Mom. It said your name and where you lived. That's how I found you." My heart pounded. "Let me see it," I said. With shaking hands, he opened the torn backpack again and carefully pulled out the envelope I had seen earlier. He handed it to me like it was something sacred. I recognized the handwriting instantly, the slanted letters, the little curls on her capital D's. My throat tightened as I unfolded the damp paper and began to read. "To my baby girl. If you're reading this, it means you're old enough to understand. And I pray that one day, you'll meet the baby brother I had to leave behind. His name is Tyler. Take care of him. Love him for me. You're my whole world. Love, Mom." By the time I finished, my vision was blurred with tears. My mother. My mom, who I had loved so much, who died when I was 6, had left behind another child, a brother I never knew existed. I sank back into the couch, the letter trembling in my hands. This can't be real," I muttered, but even as I said it, I knew it was. Tyler's voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean to scare you. I had to know if you were real. If I actually had someone out there." I looked at him, really looked at him, and noticed things I hadn't seen before. The curve of his jaw that looked like Dad's, the same shade of brown in his eyes that I saw in the mirror every morning. My chest tightened. "You've been on the streets this whole time?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Since I was 13. Foster homes, shelters, wherever I could find a place to sleep. Sometimes under bridges when there was nowhere else. People look right through you when you're homeless. You stop feeling human after a while." His words hit me like a punch. I thought about all the nights I had sat in my warm apartment, completely unaware that my own brother was out there, cold and alone, just a few miles away. I got up and grabbed a blanket from the closet. "Here," I said, draping it over his shoulders. "You're staying here tonight. No arguments." For a moment, he just stared at me, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Then, slowly, almost shyly, he nodded. I heated up some leftover pasta and handed him a plate. He ate like he hadn't had a real meal in weeks, barely stopping to breathe. Watching him, I felt a mix of anger and guilt twist inside me, anger at the world for letting this happen, and guilt for not knowing. When he finally slowed down, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since he showed up. "Why didn't Dad tell me? Why didn't he ever say I had a brother?" Tyler's gaze dropped to the floor again. "I don't know. Maybe he didn't want me. Or maybe he thought you'd be better off without me." Something in his voice, that quiet resignation, broke my heart. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but I didn't know the truth either. All I knew was that the boy sitting in my living room wasn't just some stranger. He was blood. My brother. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of me, reading it over and over. And the more I read it, the more the reality sank in. My mother had wanted me to find him. She had wanted us to be together. And no matter how impossible it felt, no matter how many questions I still had, one thing became clear to me that night: I wasn't going to let him go back to the streets. Not ever again. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, her smile, her voice in my memory. And then Tyler's voice saying, "They told me my sister died." By morning, my mind was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. I needed to know the truth, and there was only one person who could give it to me: my dad. I called in sick to work, drove straight to his house, and knocked on his door like my life depended on it. When he finally opened it, still in his robe, his face pale with confusion, I didn't waste time. "Dad," I said, my hands shaking, "why didn't you ever tell me about Tyler?" For a moment, he just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, like he didn't even understand the question. Then his face crumpled, and he stepped back, leaning heavily against the wall. Where did you hear that name?" His voice was quiet, almost scared. I held up the letter, Mom's letter, and his eyes went glassy with tears the second he saw her handwriting. "Dad," I said again, softer this time. "He's here. Tyler. He showed up at my door last night. He's my brother, isn't he? He sank into the armchair like the weight of the last 17 years had finally crashed down on him. I wanted to tell you, he whispered. God, I wanted to, but after your mom died, everything was chaos. Her parents blamed me for the accident. They said I was unfit, that I couldn't take care of a newborn. They took him, and I didn't have the strength or the money to fight them in court. His hands trembled as he rubbed his face. And then they disappeared. No calls, no letters. Nothing. It was like they'd erased him from existence. I told myself maybe it was better for you, not knowing. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me. The words stung. All this time, I said, my voice rising, I thought I didn't have anyone but you. And he's been out there, alone, homeless, and you knew. I didn't know where he was, Dad said, tears streaming down his face now. If I had known, I would've. God, I would've done something. But they cut me out completely. And by the time I finally tracked down an address, they were gone again. I failed him. I failed both of you. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The anger, the sadness, the years of secrets, it all felt like too much. I stormed out of his house, needing air, needing space, but his words echoed in my head the whole drive home. When I walked through my apartment door, Tyler was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the blank TV screen. He looked up at me cautiously, like he was afraid I'd tell him to leave. I sat down beside him, the letter still in my hands. I talked to Dad, I said quietly. His eyes widened. Your dad? What did he say? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. He said, he didn't want to lose you. That after Mom died, her parents took you and vanished. He said he tried, but they shut him out. He thought he was protecting me by not telling me. Tyler stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Protecting you, he muttered, almost to himself. I guess nobody thought about protecting me. My heart broke. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, that none of this was his fault. But I could see the walls he'd built around himself, walls made of years of abandonment, of being passed from home to home like baggage nobody wanted to claim. Tyler, I said softly, none of this changes the fact that you're my brother. And I'm not letting you go through this alone anymore. You have a home now. With me. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, staring at that letter again. The words blurred through my tears. Take care of him. Love him for me. I realized something then. My mother had trusted me with this, even without knowing if I'd ever find him. And no matter how broken our past was, I wasn't going to let her down. I didn't know what the future held, or how to help him heal from everything he'd been through. But I knew this much, Tyler wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Not to me. Not to anyone. The first few days with Tyler in my apartment were quiet, too quiet. He barely spoke, barely ate, and spent most of his time sitting on the edge of the couch, as if ready to run at any moment. I tried not to push him, giving him space, but the silence between us felt heavy. I'd leave for work in the morning and come home to find him exactly where I left him, staring out the window or scrolling through his phone, though half the time, I wasn't even sure it was on. He didn't ask for anything, not food, not money, not even a blanket. It was like he didn't want to take up space. One evening, I made spaghetti for dinner, something simple, something safe. I placed a plate in front of him and said, "Eat. Please." He hesitated, then finally picked up the fork. Watching him take those first bites, like he hadn't had a real meal in weeks, broke something inside me. I tried to make small talk, asking about music, about movies, about anything that could make him feel normal. But most of my questions were met with shrugs or short answers. On the fourth night, I came home and found him standing by the door, wearing his jacket. My stomach dropped. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked away. "I don't belong here," he said quietly. "I'm just in the way." My chest tightened. "You're not in the way, Tyler. You're my brother. This is your home now." He shook his head, his eyes wet but defiant. "People don't just keep me. Not for long. Something always happens. They either send me away, or I mess it up. It was like looking at a younger version of myself, scared, convinced the world didn't have a place for me. I stepped closer, my voice soft but firm. I'm not sending you away. You can stay as long as you need. No conditions. No expiration date. I mean it. For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was trying to decide if I was lying. Then, slowly, he nodded and set his jacket down. That night, something shifted. He started talking a little more, small things at first, like how he used to sleep under a bridge by the park, or how he always kept one sneaker untied in case he needed to run. I listened, biting back the urge to cry. Over the next week, I introduced him to parts of my life, safe, small steps. I brought him to the grocery store with me, let him pick out his favorite snacks. I showed him how to use the washer and dryer, laughing when he admitted he'd never done laundry before. One Saturday, I suggested we visit Dad. Tyler froze at first, fear flashing in his eyes. What if he doesn't want to see me? He asked. I swallowed hard. He does. He's been waiting for this for a long time. The visit was awkward at first. Dad hovered in the kitchen, wringing his hands, while Tyler sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. But then Dad pulled out an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. This, Dad said, his voice shaking as he pointed to a faded picture, was the day you were born. Your mom, she couldn't stop smiling. Tyler leaned in, his expression softening as he traced the photo with his fingers. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, a glimpse of belonging, of connection. On the drive home, he was quiet, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. It felt lighter. That night, as I passed by his room, I heard him softly humming to himself. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, maybe even fights. But in that moment, I realized something. Tyler wasn't just trying to belong. He was starting to believe he actually could. I thought things were finally starting to settle. Tyler was eating better, sleeping more, even laughing a little when we watched dumb sitcoms together. For a moment, I let myself believe we were building something steady. But deep down, I knew there were things he wasn't telling me, shadows that hung over every careful smile. The truth came out on a Wednesday night, when my phone buzzed at work. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the text made my blood run cold. If you're keeping Tyler, you need to know what he's done. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, before texting back, "Who is this?" But there was no reply. That night, when I got home, Tyler was pacing in the living room, his face pale. "We need to talk," he muttered, not looking at me. I sat down slowly. "All right. Talk." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. "Someone's been messaging you, right? Telling you I'm dangerous?" I didn't answer, and that silence was enough. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't hurt anyone," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "But I was with people who did." I felt my throat tighten. "What do you mean, Tyler?" He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around the room like he wanted to escape. "After Mom died, I didn't have anywhere to go. There was this guy, he said he'd take care of me if I ran errands for him. At first it was just little things, picking up packages, handing off envelopes. But then it got worse. Fights. Break-ins. Stuff I didn't want to be part of, but if I said no, I didn't eat." He looked at me then, eyes filled with shame. "I never stole from anyone who didn't have it coming. I swear. But I was there the night a guy got hurt. Badly. The cops don't know my name, but people out there do. And they don't forget." My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand how he could let himself get dragged into that world. But looking at him, this scared, skinny kid sitting in my living room, trembling, I couldn't. "You were just a kid," I said softly. "That doesn't change what I did," he whispered. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it could crush you. I took a deep breath and forced my voice to stay calm. "Tyler, listen to me. Whatever happened, whatever you were part of, you're not that person anymore. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." His eyes glistened, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw tears roll down his cheeks. "You don't get it," he said. "Guys like that, they always find you. And when they do, they don't just hurt you. They hurt everyone around you." The fear in his voice chilled me. Suddenly, all the little things I'd noticed, how he'd tense up when a car slowed near the apartment, how he always double-checked the locks, made sense. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window made my chest tighten. But more than fear, what I felt was this overwhelming need to protect him. He was just a kid who'd been failed by every adult who should have kept him safe. The next day, I called Dad. I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he finally said, "Bring him here. We'll figure this out together." When I told Tyler, he looked at me like I'd offered him something he didn't think existed, hope. "I don't deserve that," he said quietly. "Yes, you do," I told him. "You deserve a life where you're not looking over your shoulder every second. And we're going to make that happen." That evening, we packed his few belongings into a backpack. It wasn't much, a couple of shirts, an old hoodie, a worn-out pair of sneakers. As I zipped the bag shut, he looked at me with this mix of gratitude and guilt. "I don't know how to be normal," he admitted. "You don't have to be," I said. "You just have to be you. The rest we'll figure out." As we drove to Dad's, I kept glancing at him in the passenger seat. For the first time, he didn't look like he was planning an escape. He just sat there quietly, like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe he could stop running. Moving Tyler to Dad's house felt like the right choice. The small town was quiet, safer, with fewer strangers' eyes on us. For a few weeks, things almost felt normal. Dad treated Tyler like family, setting a plate for him at every meal, asking about school, even teaching him how to fix things around the house. For the first time, I saw Tyler smile without hesitation. But peace never lasts when you're running from something. It started with a phone call one evening. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when the landline rang. Nobody used that number except a few close relatives. I answered, expecting a telemarketer, but what I heard froze me. "Tell the kid he can't hide forever," a man's voice said, low and sharp. "We know where he is." Then the line went dead. I stood there, my hands shaking, the sound of water running in the sink like distant static. When I turned, Tyler was in the doorway, his face pale. He didn't need to ask what the call was about. He just knew. That night, he didn't eat. He barely spoke. And later, when the house was quiet, I found him on the porch, his hood up, staring out into the dark. "They're going to hurt you," he whispered when I stepped outside. I should have never come here. I should have kept running. "No," I said firmly, maybe too firmly. "You're not running anymore. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone, Tyler. Not anymore." But he didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his eyes stayed distant, the way his shoulders tensed like he was ready to bolt at any second. A few days later, it all came crashing down. I came home from work to find the front door wide open. My heart stopped. Inside, the living room was a mess, cushions tossed, a lamp broken, drawers pulled out. My first thought was that someone had broken in. Then I saw the note on the coffee table. "He owes us. Don't make us come back." There was no sign of Tyler. Panic flooded me so fast I could barely breathe. I called his phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. Dad drove around town while I called every person I could think of, his teachers, a kid from school he'd mentioned once, even the shelter where I'd first met him. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished. Hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a text, no name, no number, just a message. "Check the old train yard. Come alone." Every instinct told me it was a trap, but what choice did I have? When I got there, the place was empty except for one flickering light above the tracks. My voice echoed as I called his name. Then I heard it, a soft, broken sob from behind one of the rusted cars. Tyler was there, knees pulled to his chest, his face streaked with dirt and tears. When he saw me, he flinched like I might hit him. "They said if I didn't leave, they'd hurt you," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought if I went, maybe you'd be safe." I knelt down, my own hands trembling as I pulled him into a hug. "No, Tyler. You don't get to disappear on me. You hear me? We don't run from this. Not anymore." For a moment, he didn't hug me back. Then, slowly, his arms wrapped around me, clinging like he was drowning. Back home, Dad was waiting, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp with worry. We locked the doors, closed the blinds, and sat together at the kitchen table in silence. None of us said it out loud, But we all knew the same thing: this wasn't over. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. I'd wanted to believe I could keep him safe, that just by giving him a home and love, the danger would fade. But the truth was unavoidable now. If we didn't find a way to end this, really end it, we'd never stop looking over our shoulders. And I wasn't about to lose him. Not after everything. The morning after the train yard, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Tyler barely spoke during breakfast, his hands trembling every time the floor creaked or a car passed by outside. Dad and I tried to act normal, but the tension was too thick to hide. I knew we couldn't keep living like that, scared, waiting for the next threat. So I started making calls. First, to the police, even though Tyler begged me not to. Then to a lawyer a friend recommended. Finally, to a social worker who specialized in kids like Tyler, kids running from dangerous situations they couldn't handle alone. It wasn't easy. Every question we answered meant digging up more of Tyler's past, the people he tried to escape, the things they'd done to him, and the debts they claimed he owed. More than once, Tyler stormed out of the room, shouting that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. I let him go every time, but I kept pushing. Because I couldn't lose him. Not again. A week later, everything shifted. The police called to say they'd arrested 2 men connected to the threats, men with long records of violence and extortion. They wouldn't be bothering Tyler again. For the first time in months, we could breathe. But freedom felt strange for him. I found him that night sitting in the backyard, staring at the stars like he was trying to understand what life even meant now. When I sat next to him, he didn't look at me. "So what now?" he asked quietly. "Now," I said, "we figure out what you want. Not what anyone else wants. Just you." It took time. Tyler didn't trust the quiet at first. Every knock at the door made him flinch, every phone call made his shoulders tense. But slowly, the cracks started to heal. He started going to school regularly. Dad taught him how to change the oil in the truck. On weekends, we'd all sit around the table, eating takeout and laughing about nothing. For the first time, Tyler laughed too, a real laugh, not the forced kind he'd used to hide his fear. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Friday afternoon when the mail came. Among the bills and ads, there was an envelope from the state. Tyler opened it in the kitchen, his hands shaking, his face unreadable as he scanned the letter. Then, slowly, he handed it to me. It was the paperwork. Legal guardianship. Tyler was officially part of our family. I looked up at him, and for a second, the tough, guarded boy I'd first met was gone. There was just a kid, a scared, hopeful kid, who finally let himself believe he belonged somewhere. "You're stuck with me now," I said, trying to make my voice light even though my chest felt tight. For the first time, Tyler smiled without hesitation. "I think I'm okay with that," he said. Months passed, and life found its rhythm. Tyler joined the basketball team. He got a part-time job at a diner after school. He started making plans, real plans, for the future. College, maybe. A place of his own one day. But the best moments were the small ones. Late nights watching movies, weekend drives with Dad, Tyler dropping his walls enough to call me sis without realizing he'd said it. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me and said, "You saved me, you know." I shook my head. "No, Tyler. You saved yourself. I just made sure you didn't have to do it alone." He didn't argue. He just smiled, that quiet, grateful smile that said more than words ever could. Looking back now, I realize that everything we went through, the fear, the danger, the sleepless nights, led us here. To this moment. To a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, the future doesn't feel so terrifying. It feels like hope.